Walkers. Baby walkers. They've been a staple in baby registries for decades. A wheeled frame with a fabric seat that lets a pre-walking baby scoot around the house upright. Parents buy them believing they're giving their child a head start on walking. The opposite is true. A study published in the British Medical Journal tracked infants with and without walker use and found that babies who used walkers began walking independently up to 1 month later than those who never sat in one. The reason is mechanical. A walker eliminates every physical challenge the brain needs to learn bipedal locomotion. Balance is removed, the frame holds the baby upright. Weight bearing is removed, the seat supports the pelvis. Crawling, which is not a primitive precursor to walking, but a critical neuromotor state. That builds bilateral coordination, core strength, and crossbody patterning, gets skipped entirely. Worse, walkers encourage toe walking. The baby pushes off the ground with the tips of their toes, rather than planting a flat foot, which ingrains an abnormal gait pattern that physical therapists then have to correct. The vestibular system, the proprioceptive feedback loops, the hip stabilizers, none of them get trained. The baby moves, but the baby's body doesn't learn. The American Academy of Pediatrics has formally discouraged walker use since 2001, citing both developmental delay and catastrophic injury risk. Between 1990 and 2014, over 230,000 children under 15 months were treated in U.S. emergency departments for walker-related injuries, the most common being skull fractures from stairway falls. A baby in a walker can reach 3 feet per second, fast enough to reach an open staircase before any caregiver can stand up. Canada didn't wait for more data. In 2004, it became the first country in the world to ban the manufacture, sale, importation, and even advertisement of baby walkers. The science is settled. Walkers don't accelerate walking. They delay it, and they put your child in danger while doing so. Jumpers. Jumpers, the ones that hang from a door frame or sit on a spring-loaded base, letting the baby bounce by pushing off the floor. The baby laughs, the parent gets free hands, and everyone assumes this must be good exercise. It isn't. When a baby is placed in a jumper, they are held in a vertical, weight-bearing position before their musculoskeletal system has developed the strength or postural control to sustain that position independently. This matters because motor development is sequential. The brain expects the baby to master horizontal stability before vertical stability, to build trunk control through rolling and crawling before attempting upright movement. A jumper skips the sequence. The baby pushes off the ground using the tips of their toes, not the full foot, because they cannot yet generate force through a planted sole. This creates a repetitive motor pattern, toe extension, hip flexion, spinal compression, that the nervous system records and reinforces with every bounce. Pediatric physical therapists call these junk repetitions because they encode movement patterns the body will eventually need to unlearn. The hip concern is not theoretical when a baby's legs dangle in a jumper. With their hips abducted and externally rotated under load, the acetabular development of the hip socket can be compromised. The International Hip Dysplasia Institute has flagged sustained use of jumpers and bouncers as a contributing factor to developmental hip dysplasia, particularly in babies already predisposed. Most pediatricians who allow jumpers at all recommend a hard ceiling of 15 minutes per day. And even that is a concession, not an endorsement. The baby's joy in the jumper is real, but joy is not the same as development. A baby also smiles when you blow on their face. Pleasure is not evidence that a motor pattern is beneficial. Floor seats. Bumbo seats. The molded foam chairs designed to prop a baby into a sitting position before they can sit on their own. They were marketed as a tool to help babies learn to sit. They do the opposite. Sitting is not a passive event. It is an active, dynamic motor skill. That requires coordinated engagement of the erector spinae, the deep abdominal stabilizers, the obliques, and the hip flexors. When a baby sits independently for the first time, It's because months of tummy time, rolling and reaching, have built the trunk strength and postural reflexes to hold the spine upright against gravity. A bumbo bypasses all of that. The foam cradles the pelvis and thighs so completely that the trunk muscles have nothing to do. The baby sits, but the muscles that should be holding them there are dormant. The result is a rounded thoracic spine, posterior pelvic tilt, and compensatory neck hyperextension. The baby throws their head back because their back can't hold it forward. Researchers at the University of Hertfordshire found that babies placed in supportive seating devices showed less trunk muscle activation than babies placed on the floor in the same position. The body adapts to what you demand of it. Demand nothing, and you get nothing. The downstream problem is worse. A baby who is propped into sitting early often begins to reject tummy time, the single most important position for building the motor foundations of crawling, reaching, and eventually walking. They protest because sitting feels easier, and parents comply because the crying stops. The American Academy of Pediatrics has stated that external support devices can delay the achievement of independent motor milestones. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has documented skull fractures from bumbo seats placed on elevated surfaces. After the baby arched backward and fell, the product now carries a warning label. But the developmental cost doesn't need a fall to accumulate. Every minute in a bumbo is a minute the trunk isn't working, the vestibular system isn't challenged, and the motor sequence that leads to independent movement is stalled. Screen apps. Baby Einstein, the brand that convinced an entire generation of parents that a DVD could make their infant smarter. It couldn't. In 2009, after years of pressure from child development researchers and the campaign for a commercial-free childhood, the Walt Disney Company offered full refunds on every Baby Einstein DVD ever sold, a tacit admission that the product's educational claims had no scientific foundation. The research is not ambiguous. A landmark study from the University of Washington, published in the Journal of Pediatrics, found that for every hour per day that babies aged 8 to 16 months spent watching baby DVDs, they knew 6 to 8 fewer words than babies who watched none, not the same number, fewer. The mechanism has a name, the video deficit effect. Developmental psychologists at Vanderbilt, Georgetown, and the University of Virginia have replicated this finding across multiple studies. Babies under 2 to 3 years old process screen-based information fundamentally differently than real-world information. They can watch a person on a screen hide an object, and then fail to find that same object in the real room, even though they watched exactly where it went. The infant brain treats the screen as a separate, two-dimensional reality that does not map onto three-dimensional experience. This is not a limitation that more advanced animation can solve. It is a property of how the developing visual cortex and hippocampus interact during the first 2 years. Every minute a baby spends watching an educational video is a minute they are not engaged in the interactions that actually build language. Live, reciprocal, emotionally attuned conversation with a human who responds to their babbling, follows their gaze, and adjusts in real time. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 0 screen time for children under 18 months, with the sole exception of live video calls with family members. The exception exists because a video call is interactive. The person on the screen responds. A DVD does not, an app does not. The product category called educational media for babies is, by the standards of every major pediatric research institution in the world, a contradiction in terms. Hard shoes. Hard-soled shoes on a baby who is learning to walk. Parents buy them because they look like real shoes, because grandparents say the baby needs ankle support, because a barefoot toddler in a grocery store feels socially wrong. But the foot is not a blunt instrument that needs to be encased in structure. It is a sensory organ. The sole of a baby's foot contains over 200,000 nerve endings, one of the densest concentrations of mechanoreceptors in the entire body. These receptors feed continuous data to the cerebellum and the somatosensory cortex about surface texture, slope, temperature, and pressure distribution. This is how the brain learns balance. When you put a rigid sole between those nerve endings and the ground, you cut the data stream. The brain receives less information, makes fewer adjustments, and the baby's balance development slows. Research from the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, published in the journal The Foot, compared habitually barefoot children with habitually shod children, and found that barefoot children had significantly stronger foot musculature, better arch development, and fewer gait abnormalities. A separate study published in Podiatry Today found that walking barefoot strengthens the intrinsic muscles of the foot, up to 57% more than walking in shoes. The 26 bones, 33 joints, and over 100 muscles in a baby's foot are designed to flex, grip, splay, and adapt to uneven surfaces. This is how the arches form, how the toes learn to stabilize the body, how the ankle builds the lateral strength that prevents falls. A rigid shoe turns this dynamic, adaptive structure into a passive block. Pediatric podiatrists and orthopedic specialists are nearly unanimous. Barefoot is best at home. And when shoes are needed outdoors, the sole should be as thin and flexible as possible, soft enough that you can fold the shoe in half with one hand. The best shoe for a learning walker is the one that feels closest to no shoe at all. Car seat misuse. Infant car seats. Inside a vehicle, they are a non-negotiable, life-saving device. Outside a vehicle, they become something else entirely. The convenience is understandable. The baby falls asleep in the car, you unclip the carrier. Bring it inside and let them keep sleeping on the kitchen counter, the restaurant floor, the living room couch. The problem is that a car seat was engineered for crash physics, not for infant development or even sustained breathing. The semi-reclined, C-shaped position that makes a car seat effective at distributing deceleration forces also compresses the baby's chest cavity and flexes the chin toward the sternum. In a moving vehicle, the straps, the base angle, and the installation compensate for this. Outside the car, placed on a flat surface without the base, the angle changes, often steepening, and the airway risk increases. A study published in the Journal of Pediatrics found that oxygen saturation levels in newborns dropped to clinically concerning levels during extended periods in car seat carriers used outside the vehicle, particularly in preterm infants. The positional compression also restricts limb movement entirely. The baby's arms and legs are strapped in a fixed position, unable to reach, kick, stretch, or rotate. Every hour in that seat is an hour of zero motor input for a brain that is building its movement map. The flat skull concern is real too. Prolonged time in any device that applies consistent pressure to the same region of the occiput contributes to positional plagiocephaly, an asymmetric flattening of the skull. That, in moderate to severe cases, requires helmet therapy to correct. Pediatric guidelines are clear. The car seat is for the car. When you arrive, the baby comes out. A firm, flat surface, a crib, a bassinet, a play mat, gives their body the freedom to move and their lungs the space to expand. The safest place for a sleeping baby who's no longer in a moving vehicle is out of the seat, on their back, on a flat surface. The carrier is a transport device, not a crib, not a high chair, and not a place for a baby to spend their afternoon. The next time you see a product labeled developmental or educational for babies, ask one question. Does this replace something the baby's body was already designed to do? If the answer is yes, the product isn't helping. It's competing with evolution, and evolution doesn't lose.